I sound all right?
Well,
Is it streaming?
It's still spinning.
Okay.
Okay, now it shows that we're live.
Oh, it shows that we're live. Okay. Welcome back, guys. This is part 2 of Dandelion winemaking. So I've gone ahead and done most of the prep work this time. Last time I had a whole bunch of flowers I still had to do, but I went and cut up all of the citrus that we're going to be using. And if you can hear my cat, I'm sorry. In this first bowl, we have 1 whole orange zested. This orange, this is just the peel, and I've cut most of the pith off. You don't want the white pith or it's going to be bitter. And this, I wasn't able to zest my lemon. It just didn't want to zest, so I went ahead and cut it into strips as well. Because we are going to strain all of this out, so it's not really going to make a huge difference in the end. Then I've cut my lemon with no pith on it because the lemons and the oranges, the fruit, are actually going to stay in the jug. This is all going to be strained out once we bring this to a boil today. But the oranges and the lemons will stay in the jug until it finishes fermenting. Now these oranges may look a little bit different than the ones that are in the store. These are actually Caracara oranges. They're a little darker than normal maple oranges, and you're welcome to use either one, whatever you have. It's going to taste delicious. So what we're going to do first, we're going to go ahead and put all of our oranges and lemons, the fruit, into the jar. Now I have a Carlo Rossi 1 gallon wine jug. So that's what we're going to be fermenting in. Now if you just have the crock that we had from last time, you're also able to ferment in that. But I've always done it in the glass jug, so that's what I'm going to be doing today. So in they go. Now you may see, I'm not sure if you guys are able to see this or not, but there's some bubbles in the jug. That's not soap. It's just leftover star sand, and it's fine. It's not a big deal. So let's just go ahead and put in all of our lemons and Caracara oranges. And it says to slice them into rounds, but depending on how big the opening is of your jug, you may have to cut them a little bit smaller. Yeah, so I'm just going to cut the rounds in half and put them in the jug. Because we are going to need to get these out someday. Now you're going to leave your liquid that we're going to make in this jar with the oranges and lemons for at least a week and a half to 2 weeks, whenever it finishes fermenting. And we will get into that. But after that, you are going to need to get these out. Now after we remove these, then you can keep your wine in the jug for as long as you want to. Alright, 1 orange in. Then in goes the lemon. Now this is going to have some citrus notes and floral notes. Also, I did not remove the seeds from the lemon, so that's what I'm going to do now. The seeds, it didn't actually mention what would happen if you left the seeds. I'm assuming they would make it bitter. The Caracara, they don't really have, the ones I have, don't actually have any seeds in them. If they are, they're so small that I don't see them. Ooh, so it just burns a little. So I hope you guys can actually hear me okay. We had a little trouble with the sound earlier, but I think it's fixed now. A lot of seeds in this lemon. And it burns a little bit. Alright, so get these seeds out of here. And to the second one. And when my helper gets back, if you guys have typed any questions in the chat, he'll read them out to me. I can't actually see your questions. My computer's turned away from me. And one more slice. Alright. So, the oranges and the lemon fruits have went into the jar. Now, here I have 1 pound of golden raisins. The recipe just specified raisins. You don't have to use golden, but the wine is going to pick up the delicious sweet flavor of the raisin. So pick a raisin that you actually like to eat because that's the flavor that you're going to get. So, let's see how we can do this. I may get a funnel for this. If not, it may take me a minute. I'm not sure if I have a funnel. I have a canning funnel, but it's also really large. Let me get my canning funnel. Mela, do you know where my canning funnel is? So I can pour them in. My helper's gonna get me a canning funnel, so let's make this a little easier since we have so many raisins. It's better than nothing, I think. So let's try this. It's not perfect, but it's working a little bit. I don't know what happened to my gray funnel. Some of my raisins are in clumps, so it's getting a little stuck. Alright. So can you see from your phone now? Anybody watching?
Looks like we got 3 people.
Yeah, that's good.
We had 5. Now we're down to 2.
Oh no. Okay. That's alright. Oh, might pick back up. And if no one watches, it's gonna be on YouTube anyway, so. Alright, once you have added all of your raisins to the jar, we can move on to the next part. Okay. So this is the last thing that's going to go in the jar for now. So we're just going to set that off to the side. Now we are going to take this huge crock of dandelion water and flowers and bring them to a boil on the stove. We're also going to add the orange zest, or the orange peel, the lemon peel, and the orange zest. So, if you want to follow me to the stove, that's what we're going to do next.
2, 1.
Alright, and we're back. So, to the pot I have added the dandelion petals, the orange zest, the orange peel, and the lemon peel. And now we're just going to wait and bring this to a boil. So, we need it to all heat up. So then after it's to a boil, we are going to strain it. And to strain it, I'm going to use a brewing bag. So we can get all the petals and all the orange peel into this bag. And I'm going to strain it right back into the crock that it was in, so let's go ahead and wash that out too. And oh, it smells fermented. Very, very strong scent. Okay, so once that gets to a boil, we're going to add it back into the crock, or strain it into the crock. Then we're going to pump it into the carboy. So a bit of a process. Alright, so we just have to wait until that gets to a boil. So now we can switch back. Since we're going to be waiting a while, we can make some medieval spice mixes. So join me for that. Okay, we're back. So while our wine is boiling, we are going to look at this book, Tourney Cooking, Recipes to Enjoy at Outdoor Events. So we're going to turn to the very back of the book, and today we are going to make 2 medieval spice mixes. The first one is called Powder Fort, or Powder Forte, and the second one would be Powdered Deuce. Both of these are used extensively throughout this book. And if you guys want, we can go ahead and make other recipes down the line from this book. But we're going to need the spice mixes to do so. So, the first one, Powder Fort, we are going to need 1/2 of a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. So, there we go. We're going to grind our black pepper till we get 1/2 teaspoon. And making these spices is going to get a little messy because we are going to crush some ourselves. Okay, let's see. I also have my measuring spoon. So 1/2 teaspoon. Let's see how much we got. Perfect. Okay. 1/2 teaspoon of freshly cracked black pepper. Alright, next ingredient. 1½ teaspoons of ginger. And you're going to want to use dried ginger. So, 1/2 teaspoon. half teaspoon, half teaspoon. Alright, so those are 1.5 teaspoons of ginger. Mix that around a bit. Next, we're going to use 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Now there's different types of medieval cinnamon. I'm just going to use the Great Value ground cinnamon brand. There's Ceylon cinnamon and cassia cinnamon. This is probably cassia, which they would not have used. They probably would have used the Ceylon, but we're going to use what we have on hand today. Actually, I can probably just... Yeah, there we go. So, half teaspoon. Half teaspoon. Okay, so 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Alright, the next thing, we have half a teaspoon of cloves, half a teaspoon of grains of paradise. Now, if you can't get a hold of grains of paradise, it says here, if you can't find the grains, use a 50-50 mix of ginger and black pepper. And then that is the final ingredient. So what we're going to do, get our mortar and pestle here. Use a half teaspoon. Fill up my half teaspoon here. Alright. Okay, so there's half teaspoon of whole cloves, which we're going to grind. And then my grains of paradise. I don't see. These are my cloves. There they are. So, open. Where do they open? There we go. Actually, I haven't opened these yet. Alright. Half teaspoon of grains of paradise. And now we're going to grind these very finely. Now if you don't have this, a spice grinder would work just fine. But since I have it, and we have time, since we're waiting for everything to come to a boil, we're going to sit and we're going to grind for a bit. Grind and grind and grind away. It's starting to smell delicious. Grains of paradise are one of my favorite spices to use in period recipes. I believe we've even used some grains of paradise in a mead once. Now, we're almost there. I think the hardest part is grinding up the cloves. You definitely want to grind the cloves. And we're not up to a boil yet, so we may have time to make a second. Okay. It's almost there. It is going to be an arm workout if you do it by hand. Alright, I think we're there. Mix it up. mixture that we see here. It smells pretty strong. You definitely smell the grains and the cloves, and the ginger really comes through strong with that. And that one was the powder fort. Alright, so we're going to do that. The powder fort. Now our next one that we're going to be making, powdered deuce. Now this has very, very similar ingredients. So there's actually only one difference. Besides the measurements. The measurements are different, but there's also one extra ingredient. So in this one, we're going to start with 4 teaspoons of ginger. So, get the ginger back out. And I'm going to wipe off my spoon. So, oops, that's the half teaspoon. Alright, 4 teaspoons. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 teaspoons of ginger. This is going to be very gingery. Alright, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Alright, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And now this is where we have the different ingredient. Half a teaspoon of sugar. We're actually going to add sugar to this one. Here's our sugar. Alright, so let's mix this around for a second. Now we're not done with this one, but I am going to pour it into my clear container and scrape out all that ginger. Now usually you would clean your mortar and pestle between scrapings, but we're using the exact same ingredients, so it's not a huge deal. Alright, so now we need to grind again. Half teaspoon of cloves, half teaspoon of grains of paradise. Again. Teaspoon of cloves. Half teaspoon of grains of paradise. And if you are looking for period spices, my spice sage. That's where I've gotten a lot of my spices before. I haven't ordered from them in a long time, but I've always had really good success with their spices. Now, most of the time I just get my spices from the Asian market or the Indian market. But if there's something I cannot find, my spice sage. Alright, so we are going to grind these just like we did a minute ago. And of course this is the last part of the spices, and then once I grind this, we will go check on our dandelions and see how they are going. Now, next week I had planned to use some of these spice mixes. A recipe that I found in this book would be pears and red wine, and it uses one of these spice mixes. I'll have to look and see which one it uses exactly. Alright, there we go. Looking good. Any comments? Anything? Anybody watch it? Yep.
Shows one.
Oh, alright. Oh, did you go ahead and share it to the other groups and stuff?
Yes.
Okay. So that brown mixture again is powdered juice. So try to remember, and I'll put those in a jar and label them later so I don't forget which is which. Although we did make more of the powdered juice because it called for a lot more ginger. Alright, so now the recipe I had planned for these were, Platina's roasted carrots. It calls for the powder fort. And the one next week that I'm thinking I could use with this would be the Wardenies and syrup, which is just pears and syrup. So next week, if I can get the pears and syrup, or the pears and wine, it's 1 16-ounce can of pear halves and light syrup, which actually I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use fresh pears. 1 cup of sweet red wine, 2 teaspoons cinnamon, or actually, you can use the powdered juice for this one. You're also going to need vinegar and saffron. So we may be making that recipe and maybe the roasted carrots next week. But we made our spices this week, and I think our dandelions are boiling. So let's go check on that.
Three, two, one.
Alright, I've just turned off the dandelions from boiling. Now this is a brew bag. You can get this at your local brew store, or you can use cheesecloth. Either one will be okay, or a very, very fine mesh strainer. You don't want all of your petals in your wine. This is the last part the last time we're actually going to be using the petals or the citrus rinds. So for this, it's going to be a little bit difficult. The brew bag is a little small to put around this, so one of us may have to hold it. Let's go ahead and use the auto siphon. That'll be easier. I don't want to get burned. So this is an auto siphon that we're going to use.
Yeah, well, last time we did it, hurt the siphon, so.
So what do I do? It can't cool down, we gotta do all the sugar.
I'll hold.
Alright. That's the problem.
I can hold.
I don't want you to get burned.
Fine.
It's not fine for you to get burned. What is it in for? I think it might be easier. No, I'm gonna burn you. No, we'll have to find a different way. I'm going to burn you. Let's get a big strainer and then go from there. Get that strainer out for me, please. So first we're gonna use a big strainer because it's just a lot safer. I don't want to get it on the stove. Yeah, so if it makes a mess, it's on the counter. Woo. Is it making it?
Yeah.
Oh god. Oh no, it's getting everywhere. I can't. Alright. into the sink. I can't pick that up. Maybe hot utensils? See, it's kind of making a bit of a mess there, so. Alright, so now let's try it now. Alright, that was a lot easier. Okay, so it's all been drained. It is a greenish brown murky liquid. And now we're going to add the sugar. Here's our sugar. Now, the recipe calls for 3 pounds. This is a 4-pound bag, but I've used about a pound of it, so we're going to add the whole of this bag. But 3 pounds of sugar. Which is a lot of sugar. But the yeast has to have something to eat. Alright, and I'm going to stir it with a wooden spoon. You don't want to stir it with a metal or plastic spoon, because the plastic spoon is going to melt. Alright, so we're just going to stir this until all the sugar is dissolved. And if I didn't get all of the rind or all of the dandelion petals out, it'll be alright. We will be straining again when it is at room temperature, and then we can use the auto siphon. So, stirring, stirring, stirring. I'm pretty sure all of that sugar has been dissolved. Alright, all the sugar is dissolved. Now the last part we have is the yeast. Now, this is the yeast that I will be using. Hopefully you guys will be able to see it. Lalvin D47 yeast. Now, I had 4 different types of yeast in the last stream, but I've looked them all up, and this one is actually good for white wines with citrus notes. And that's exactly what we're actually going to be making, because we have the citrus from the Cara oranges and the lemon, and so this will be perfect for that. Back up. Oh. Alright. So we cannot add the yeast until it has cooled down significantly. It is way too hot to add the yeast. It will instantly kill the yeast if I add this right now. So when it is at a room temperature, we'll add this. And that is our last step. Now after you have added the yeast, well, you can either add the yeast directly into your carboy and then pour the liquid on it, or you can stir it in and then pour your liquid into the carboy. And that's the last step. Now after that, you are going to put an airlock on your carboy and then just wait until it stops bubbling. That should be 1 to 2 weeks depending on your yeast, how much sugar you added, but give it 1 or 2 weeks. Then it should stop, and you're going to get all of the raisins and the lemons and oranges out of there. You want those completely out. Then you're going to put your liquid back in, and you're going to leave it for another 2 weeks to make sure it has stopped fermenting. Because if you go straight to bottle it, which you can, but if you do, there's a chance it will blow up, because you may have reactivated your yeast when you poured it out and poured it back in. It may have woken it up, which has happened before. So I would put it back in the jug for at least 2 more weeks. Then put it in your wine bottles and let it sit for 6 months. So if you're making the yeast with me today, this is the very end of March. It should be done around September, which is, hopefully, it doesn't get canceled, our Triumph celebration, and I will have this dandelion wine for you all to try. And that's our last step for today. Just waiting for this to cool, pouring it into the jug, adding the yeast. And so...
Want to show them the airlock?
Yeah, let me show you the setup that I have for it.
Oh, right there.
Oh, there it is. Oh, and also, this was the Star San. This is what we use to clean everything. You don't want dirt, grime, bacteria in your alcohol. So definitely use this to clean it with. Here's our little cork, little hole. This is our airlock. Gonna put it in, fill it with water, put on the lid. And when this stops moving and stops bubbling, that's when you know you're good. The first time. When it stops moving, you get your citrus out. Then you pour it back in. Put it back in for 2 weeks. Make sure it doesn't move. When you're sure it's not moving, then you can move to bottle it. All right. If there are no other questions, this was part 2. Now, if you guys wanted a part 3 with racking it, bottling it, that with part 3 and 4 we could do as well, and we could also throw in a cooking episode with that. So let me know in the comments if you want to see that. If not, I've explained the process and you're done. So this is where we're going to end our stream today. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.